Good morning. What could possibly go wrong going onto a stage on crutches, hey? It's going to be fine. I am Will. I'm co-chief of Song brand here in the UK. It's very nice to meet you all.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Patrik Hansson. I'm the global CMO of Arla, which is one of the biggest dairy companies in the world, but also one of the biggest food producers in the UK.
So we're going to start with a small apology about the sweary title, but the fact actually that we make no apology about the provocation of the question. I'm intrigued to know when you read that question, how many of you are thinking, is dairy really fucked? And how many of you are thinking, is dairy really fucked? And the point being that there is so much conjecture and so much passion and debate around dairy today and its role in today's society that we just ask you for the next 15 minutes to put away those pistols, to park your personal preferences for a bit, and open your minds up to consider not just a glass of milk and the role it played in your life as a young person, or even in the role that it plays in society today, but to think about dairy, and to think about dairy and its role in the global narrative around nutrition. And we want to talk to you about our feelings on that. Whether we answer that question at the end or not, you will see. But we want to start by talking about some of the hard truths in this debate. It's such a privilege to work with one of the leading dairy companies in the world, to face into all of the hard stuff, to really understand what it's like when you hear an audience saying to you that they love your product, but they don't feel like they can actually enjoy consuming it anymore. In fact, they feel guilty, they feel shameful, they feel confused. It's a very difficult conversation to have, but it's an important conversation to have. Just as it is to think about the huge nutrition gaps that are opening up outside of our London bubble, outside of the UK, around the world, where simple, affordable nutrition is increasingly difficult for people to obtain on a regular basis to provide the sustenance that their families need day in, day out. Those hard truths are everywhere in this category. They're everywhere in the ways in which we consume dairy today. But the thing that we're increasingly aware of is a small but very loud voice that is challenging dairy in terms of the fact that it's unsustainable, unethical, unhealthy. It's unsure whether a dairy has a role to play in these days. And it feels like the huge energy that's swirling around the dairy industry can be really hard to navigate. And actually, the most critical thing is thinking about the dairy industry in light of all of that kind of swirling narrative. And it can feel as though the industry itself is kind of stuck. It's perhaps a bit too traditional. It's not able to keep pace with all of the swirling narrative about sustainability, about ethical ways of providing health to people. And actually, we started to think about this challenge in many different ways. But the thing that we did, as I'm sure a lot of us do these days, is we asked AI. We said to AI, paint us a picture of how the dairy industry presents itself to the world these days. And this is the image we got back. We got loads of imagery. But what you can see here is clearly lots of the kind of established tropes of marketing, of many of the kind of brands around the world that want to promote their dairy product in a way that makes you feel good about it as part of a cornerstone of a healthy diet as a family. We've all seen it before. If we shut our eyes, it's probably what we'd imagine. But it's quite alarming to think about how out of kilter that kind of perception, that image that's been kind of projected by the dairy industry is, how out of kilter it is with the kind of swirling narrative and debate and challenges that dairy now faces. So Patrik, if we know what AI thinks of dairy, what do you think?
Well, I'm not surprised that this is what pops up when you ask AI. It doesn't make me proud. But I think the way dairy has communicated has been a lot about cementing old truths as opposed to communicating how dairy fits into a model world. And I think the problem with that is not only that we're wasting a lot of money on advertising that no one really cares about. The real problem of that is that the story of dairy and the role that dairy plays in future sustainable food systems and the role of real, natural, nutrition-dense products for the world is not being told. And this is in a world which is experimenting more and more with food.
And food is our start point. When we start to think about the problems that dairy faces, as Patrik says, we can't look in a kind of closed kind of environment at the product that's at hand or the category that we serve. We need to think much bigger than that. And as many of you will have read, at the moment, kind of food or the problems with food is having its kind of cultural moment. It feels like we're lifting the lid on lots of the processes that have been involved in manufacturing food-like substances that are put on many of the tables of many of the families up and down the country that we know are not necessarily providing the right nutrition to the right people at the right time. That ticking time bomb of the kind of fake food that we all now kind of accept as part of our daily lives is a massive, massive, massive challenge for us. It's not just a challenge in this country, but it's a challenge globally. As the global population increases and continues to increase, we will need a food system that can feed everybody. So in a world that's become so fake, it's quite a difficult thing to understand or think about how dairy can find its feet, can find its place and its role to be credible, to be effective, not just in that glass of milk, but thinking about it as a way of providing nutrition to people in a way that's affordable, sustainable, and available to as many people as possible. So Patrik, if this ticking time bomb of the food system is kind of getting louder and louder, how do you feel when people say that there isn't really a space for dairy in the future of this food system?
Well, for me, it's about the transformation that every industry needs to go through. And of course, we, in Arla, as being one of the biggest dairy players in the world, are passionate, I would even say obsessed, about bringing the dairy industry into a sustainable future. We are so obsessed that our farmers, as you know, we are a co-op, and we have 9,000 owners, all being farmers, and they've decided that we should pay more money to the farmers who are driving sustainability journey, the ones who have better CO2 footprint in farm, but also the farmers that are experimenting, testing out new things, and getting us more knowledge about how to do future farming. And we're not talking small money here. The farmers are redistributing, or we are helping them to redistribute, more than 100 million pounds every year amongst farmers, from the ones who are lagging to the ones who are driving the change forward. So of course, that is going to give economic incentives for the farmers to join the journey, but equally important, it's going to give us an immense amount of knowledge about best farm practice, knowledge about how farming is going to be looking into the future, and that knowledge, of course, we will share with our farmers, but we will also share it with the industry overall and our competitors, because the whole industry needs to move at the fastest speed that the industry is doing today. So with that said, I think we as a company have been too obsessed in telling the story about the sustainability transition we're doing. And I think the big risk with that is we lost touch with the real story we need to tell, which is what does our product do in order for the world to move into a food system that is much more plant-rich and less meat-heavy. And our role of dairy and the nutritional component of dairy marries the vegetables in a way which opens up a lot of opportunities for us if we can tell that story. So I'm now trying to mobilize my organization of being much more nutrition-focused, being obsessed about how can we bring dairy and make dairy the enhancer to future food, and how can we be more obsessed about filling nutrition gaps that we see everywhere in the world today, in the rich part of the world and in the poor part of the world. But it's not only telling the story, it's coming up with the products, coming up with modern products that does that job, but it's also about using creativity and communicate in a different way, a way which is much more in tune with the society out there, so we don't get the boring advertising we saw before. And we believe that creativity is the superpower that's going to unlock those communications, but also unlock the products and the energy that will be sitting in our companies, moving us from traditional dairy to more nutrition-obsessed company.
So as Patrik says, we don't have the answer here today to say that we can make dairy 100% sustainable as it is today, but the brilliant kind of leading of change within Arla and within the category to make sure that the different question that's being answered about nutrition rather than the dairy products of old, is the one in which we need, as a global population, in every market around the world to move forward. So we might not be able to say that dairy is not fucked, or that we can unfuck it completely, but we can certainly do something to reset the relationship that people have with dairy, to understand it in different ways, to realize that it isn't what we used to enjoy, it can be something different. And as Patrik said, the role of creativity in doing that at Arla is phenomenal. We were first part of a conversation a while back about a moonshot, the moonshot brief within the company. And ultimately, the kind of energy that was created and dynamism around the question of how do we solve the biggest question we face as a business. So when you hear the brilliant stories from Patrik about the work that's been going on to change the way in which farmers are incentivized, how many other big corporations are doing that across their entire supply chain to make sure that sustainability is a practice, a daily practice in everything that they do? How many other organizations are open sourcing their best secrets in terms of how they make their product to benefit the whole of the category, to make sure that everyone involved and associated with dairy can be as sustainable as possible? That creativity is already in the DNA of Arla. And the moonshot brief that we're so proud to partner with Arla on is actually to answer that question of the future. How do we make dairy a nutritious and affordable food that's sustainable and fit for the future, and a future that we can't yet quite envisage, but one in which that type of food will be more important than ever before? So we're incredibly excited and proud to be in this debate, as hard as it is, as challenging as those questions are, as kind of breathless as it might be. As the Arla CEO said a couple of weeks ago, we need to find energy in the uncomfortableness. And that's something that courses through us as a team, as a partnership, and seeing it in Arla and the way in which they use creativity, not as the sole reserve of marketing, but in order to find new answers to old questions, to start to think about the biggest challenges that they face, to not be silenced by the criticisms that is being leveled at the industry, to really kick on and to find the moonshot in terms of how to drive the category and ultimately food forward. And the point to make, that possibly is one of the most important points here, is that whilst all of the great work that's going on inside a brilliant business like Arla is super important and well underway, actually resetting and re-establishing that relationship with the outside world is as important as anything. The danger here and the trap that this industry, that many categories have fallen into before, is to try and find the coolest, funniest, sexiest way to talk about how and why a particular product is right for somebody. It's attractive, it's sustainable, it's healthy, it's the good thing that you need to make you feel good about the food that you enjoyed. That is a trap. We've done an extensive amount of research over a number of different markets into what people really think about sustainability, what really motivates them to act in new and more ethical ways. And the horrible, sad truth is, in a study of 8,000 people across 8 different markets, nobody still cares enough. The truth is that people care most about what's closest to home. And actually, if you can't connect with people on values that are relevant to them in the lives that they live today, you can forget talking about sustainability. So one of the biggest kind of pivots in our thinking and our strategy going forward is to rethink about the job that we need to do, as well as reframing the business that Arla are in, as well as thinking about nutrition and not just dairy, as well as thinking about everybody, not just Western markets. We need to think differently about sustainability. And the job is not to make humans more sustainable, as loads of marketing will kind of lead you to believe. The job is actually to make sustainability more human. And to do that, it's about zeroing in on those big universal values and motivations which we know to be true to human beings the world over, and then understanding how is it that your organization, your business, your product, your brand can play a credible and motivating role in their lives which will affect change. Only when we can connect these two things can we genuinely ask a big, horrible question like the one that we've posed in the title today. So the challenge is underway. We are busily working on lots of incredible initiatives inside the organization and finding those kind of new opportunities for creativity. This isn't now the moment in the presentation when I take you through the next 50 ideas of what we're doing. We're going to do something a bit different. We're actually going to do something which I'm not sure most brands would do when talking about a thorny subject like sustainability or healthy and ethical practices. We're going to make a pledge. And Patrik and I decided that we really wanted to stand here today as a partnership and make a pledge to everybody in this room and every brand at MadFest. And the pledge is simple. The pledge is that we are stepping forward and taking a responsibility for the biggest challenges that we face as a category, not just a business. And we will do everything that we can to use creativity to find new ways to drive forward. But the pledge is that we're going to be back. We're going to be back on this stage, if they'll have us, maybe no sweary title next year, and we're going to tell you what's and all about everything that we've done, everything that's coming in the next 12 months, everything that's already underway, but all of the big, scary, horrible, difficult problems that we will face into to make sure that Arla Dairy and all dairy is the nutrition that the future planet that we will become will desperately need in the food that it deserves and needs and wants to be nutritious. That's it. See you next year. Thank you very much.